Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 8. The woolly mammoth. The male woolly mammoth used to have a very difficult time living in the vast tundra of North America and Siberia. Researchers have discovered that male mammoths often perished in unfortunate and unusual ways. They would get stuck in thin ice and freeze, and they'd also tumble into holes. And sometimes they'd get washed away in mud flows. Researchers recently looked at the remains of 95 mammoths discovered across Siberia. They found 66 of the specimens to be male and 29 to be female, making about 70% of them male. The reason so many male mammoths were discovered stuck in the ice was likely because they traveled alone outside of the herd. The consensus among researchers is that mammoths without mates were far more likely to stumble into danger. The only good thing about all these male mammoths falling into the ice is that many of them have been perfectly preserved. They got trapped in the ice tens of thousands of years ago and were frozen solid, and now researchers are able to excavate them and study their biology. For example, they've begun analyzing a baby mammoth that was recently discovered by gold miners in Canada's Yukon. The gold miners didn't just find bones, they found an entire specimen that died when it was only a month old. The young woolly mammoth was still complete with its internal organs. It looks like it got stuck in the mud 30,000 years ago, then was immediately frozen. The mammoth was encased in ice and is now believed to be the most immaculate mammoth specimen ever found in North America. According to Dr. Stuart Sutherland from the University of British Columbia, mammoths first evolved in Africa during the Pliocene epoch. They entered Europe roughly 3 million years ago. Then, around 1.5 million years ago, the European steppe mammoth crossed the Bering Strait into North America. The steppe mammoth eventually evolved into the Columbian mammoth, which strayed all the way down into Costa Rica. These things stood 13 feet at the shoulder and weighed upwards of 11 tons. They weren't preposterously big, but they were still huge. They were roughly 30% larger than the modern African bush elephant. But woolly mammoths were different. These were smaller cousins to the Columbian mammoths who lived mostly in the cold north. They had coarse hair that was extremely thick, along with small ears to help conserve the heat. And now for number 7. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Nuno Pestana and Hemiwara for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries, or dinosaurs, or animals found in the ice. We've got it all. Number 7. Illy. Lake Iliamna in Alaska is a place of frozen mystery. For decades, locals have been witnessing a strange monster that they've dubbed Illy. This thing is the Loch Ness Monster of Alaska, a creature that supposedly survives in one of the world's coldest lakes. Illy is so famous that TV fisherman Jeremy Wade did a feature for river monsters based on it. He even traveled to the lake and tried to catch the creature. Illy is said to be 30 feet long and strong enough to flip a boat. While nobody's ever found any physical evidence that it exists, the reports continue to pile up. Lake Iliamna is the biggest lake in Alaska, and it's the second biggest lake in the US. It reaches an average depth of over 130 feet, with the deepest point of it almost reaching 1,000 feet. Long before Russians colonized the area, the Tlingit natives were telling stories about a water demon called Guna Kadate. Their stories say the creature looked like a marine wolf, with a huge body like an orca, but the head of a vicious canine. This monster was also said to be 30 feet long. Just imagine how frightening such a thing would be to see while taking an ice plunge. The Tlingit even worship the creature as a fish god, and there are pictograms along the Alaskan coast and in British Columbia showing Illy. The Aleut people, who also lived in the area during ancient times, believed there were multiple creatures, and they called them Jig-ik-nak. The Aleut were often fearful while traveling in canoes because the beasts would appear in packs and devour indigenous travelers. In modern times, Alaskans have tried desperately to find the creature in the cold lake, but nobody has found any evidence to suggest that the marine wolf is real. However, in 1942, investigators Bill Hammersley and Babe Islesworth witnessed a grouping of weird creatures while flying over the lake. They supposedly saw over a dozen monsters, each more than 30 feet long. Hammersley said the fish-like freaks looked like little submarines. Of course, though, there is no tangible evidence to corroborate the story. Number 6. The stranded fox. A fox off the coast of Newfoundland was discovered stuck on an iceberg. Even the most well-adapted creatures of the ice sometimes find themselves in perilous situations. Alan Russell from St. Louis just happened to be in the area. He and his crabbing crew spotted something weird sitting on the iceberg a few miles from shore. It's important to note that at this point, the iceberg was only moments away from crumbling into the ocean. The mushroom-shaped block of ice was hanging on by a thread, so Russell had his crew get closer to the iceberg, at which point they realized they were looking at a small Arctic fox. They could see he was tiny and obviously afraid. The fox was also wet and being picked at by seagulls, as he was unable to get away. But Russell and his crew weren't about to leave the fox stuck in the ice. They couldn't call the fox to them like a dog, but they were able to hit the iceberg with their boat, knocking the fox into the water. Then they scooped it up with a net. Once on board, the crew placed the cold creature in a plastic pan. When they stopped for supplies, they purchased Vienna sausages for the little animal to eat and filled the pan with sawdust to help the fox dry. Thanks to the actions of the crew, the fox survived. They kept him for a few days and fed him sausages. He never became aggressive and even started acting like a pet. But after a few days, it was time to let the fox go. So they released him back into the wild, where he's been spotted taking naps in some neighborhood doghouses. Number 5. The squirrel mummy. In the Klondike goldfields of Canada's Yukon Territory, miners discovered yet another ancient frozen animal. They found a lump of exceptionally preserved fur, claws, and tiny limbs. Nobody knew what in the world the lump of fuzz was when it was first found in 2018. But now that scientists in the Yukon have investigated it, they're confident they know what the mystery blob is. They say it's likely a mummified squirrel that died during hibernation 30,000 years ago. The Arctic ground squirrel, which looks like a gopher, curled up in its nest and fell asleep. Then, for an unknown reason, it died. But because of the intensely cold landscape, it froze before it could decay. And by some crazy turn of events, it ended up buried in the Klondike. What's really cool is that Arctic ground squirrels still exist. They still live in the same place where the mummified squirrel ball was found. Even though all the big animals of the Ice Age went extinct, squirrels have continued to thrive. This particular squirrel has been nicknamed Hester, after Hester Creek, where it was uncovered. Representatives with Yukon Beringia Interpretive Center said it's amazing to imagine Hester running around in the Yukon thousands of years ago, especially since it lived alongside such fantastic beasts. The squirrel ball has yet to be unfurled, though. Researchers don't want to disturb the artifact in case they damage it in the process. Veterinarian Dr. Jess Heath was hired to x-ray the squirrel. The scans revealed the skeleton to be in almost perfect condition. It's one of the greatest Ice Age fossils that's ever been found. Upon its discovery, researchers were planning to put it on display at the Interpretive Center, where it will likely stay for a long time. But for now, they are trying to learn everything they can about the 30,000-year-old squirrel. Number 4. The bison. Any foodie would have been very lucky to be at the dinner table of paleontologist Dale Guthrie on an exciting night in 1984. The dinner party was held in Alaska, where Guthrie and a small group of people feasted on a delicacy no other living humans have ever tasted. They ate a stew made from the neck meat of an ancient bison. The bison, nicknamed Blue Babe, was discovered frozen in the ice 5 years earlier by gold miners. The Alaskan gold miners noticed one of their hydraulic hoses was melting something weird, and when they took a closer look, they realized they were accidentally melting the body of some kind of preserved beast. They then reported what they found to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Soon afterward, Dale Guthrie arrived to excavate, as they were worried the animal would decompose. It was a lot of work, but he managed to dig the ancient bison out of the ice. Back at the laboratory, Guthrie and his colleagues learned what they could about the animal. They found out that it died between 36,000 and 50,000 years ago. They also discovered tooth marks and claw cuts in the skin, showing the bison had been attacked by a predator. Judging by the savagery of the marks, Guthrie figured it was an extinct lion ancestor. The attacker was likely Panthera leoatrox, aka the American lion. The way that the bison had frozen had given its skin the texture of beef jerky. So, the one thing that made sense to researchers was to eat it. They cut meat from the neck and added vegetables and spices to make a stew. 8 people were then invited to the dinner party to partake in the once-in-a-lifetime feast. With a glass of wine and a piece of prehistoric bison, everyone at the dinner table had a fantastic meal. Guthrie said it tasted just as he'd expected, but with a little bit of mud mixed in. Today, the taxidermied specimen of Blue Babe is on display at the University of Alaska Museum. Would you like to try prehistoric bison that's been frozen in the ice for thousands of years? Let me know in the comments. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. Number 3. The Greenland dinosaur. Scientists discovered what they say is the first known dinosaur that lived in Greenland. Greenland is just as difficult to discover fossils as somewhere like Antarctica because of all the ice. The dinosaur was dubbed Illy, which translates from the Inuit language to mean cold bone in English. Scientists say the dinosaur was an early ancestor of sauropods, the biggest land animals that ever existed. The remains weren't discovered recently. A pair of skulls were uncovered by Harvard University scientists in 1994 in eastern Greenland. Initially, scientists thought the skulls belonged to a dinosaur from France called Platosaurus. But according to Victor Beccari from Nova University, Lisbon, that's not true. The skulls actually belong to a never-before-seen species of dinosaur. Researchers came to their conclusion by using X-rays to scan the fossils. They then created three-dimensional models to understand what the rest of the bodies from the skulls would have looked like. Everything pointed to a new species. It was especially lucky that one skull was from a juvenile and the other was from an animal on the cusp of adulthood. This gave researchers a great look at the development of the bone structure. The closest comparable dinosaurs to this new species are sauropodomorphs from Brazil, which evolved about 30 million years ago, but 15 earlier than Illy. Both types of dinosaurs could grow to between 10 and 30 feet in length. They were also harmless plant eaters with huge feet. What's amazing about this specimen is that it's the first distinct Greenlandic dinosaur. Though at the time it was alive, Greenland looked a lot different. The enormous island was closer to the equator, meaning it had an extremely warm climate. It wasn't the icy nightmare it is today. Researchers are eager to find more fossils hidden underneath Greenland's ice, hopefully of other new dinosaurs buried beneath the snow. Number 2. The microscopic animal. For 24,000 years, a worm-like creature enjoyed a peaceful hibernation frozen in the Siberian ice. But now, scientists have revived it in a laboratory. Researchers awoke a microscopic animal called a bdelloid rotifer. The thing looks like an invisible worm, extremely translucent and nearly impossible to see. Rotifers are well known to scientists. They live in fresh water or dwell in moist soil. They're legitimate animals with brains, muscles, and reproductive systems. They have all the normal animal parts. The only big difference is that they are extremely small. And of course, they can sleep for a really long time. Rotifers are notoriously tough and can live in some of the harshest environments. They survive starvation, dehydration, and radiation. They can also live in the freezing cold and in places with almost no oxygen. But this particular specimen has taken living at the edge to a whole new level. The microscopic multicellular worm was found 11 feet in the permafrost, and scientists were able to confirm its age by radiocarbon dating the soil surrounding it. Once scientists got the creature back to their lab, they put it in a petri dish. Then they placed it in a moderate climate and waited to see what happened. Sure enough, the multicellular organism started to move. Then it began to reproduce, which it does asexually. To make things as simple as possible, the scientists woke up the worm from a nap of nearly 25,000 years. It wasn't the first time they've done this. A previous team of researchers awakened some roundworms that had been sleeping in the ice for 40,000 years. They've done the same thing with bacteria, viruses, and even moths. So who knows what researchers will pull out of the ice next? Number 1. The wolf pup. It seems Canadian miners can't move 10 feet without bumping into a frozen animal. A female wolf puppy was found by a gold miner near Dawson City in 2016. The miner was excavating an area of permafrost when the discovery was made. The wolf pup had been stuck in the frozen earth for 57,000 years. Associate Professor Julie Meechin from Des Moines University in Iowa said the specimen is the most complete wolf ever found from the Ice Age. The wolf still had all her skin and hair, and her soft tissue was completely intact. Even her little nose was still remarkably preserved after an impossible amount of time in the ice. A slew of tests confirmed the age of the puppy, including checking isotopes and oxygen levels. And the X-ray scans of the creature's skeleton and teeth showed the wolf was only 7 weeks old when she passed away. Researchers then named the puppy Zur, which means wolf in the Han language. Finding these types of prehistoric wolves is fairly common in Siberia, but it almost never happens in North America. The wolf's genome showed it had similarities to the Beringia wolves, which are now extinct in the Yukon. and his genome also showed similarities with Russian gray wolves. Zur appears to have been a mixture between North American monster wolves and continental wolves. The complex genes were likely the result of mixed breeding across the Bering Land Bridge. Another interesting thing researchers found is that the wolf was primarily eating fish. The animal's stomach contents show that in her first 7 weeks of life, Zur primarily hunted Chinook salmon from the Klondike River. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and let me know what videos you'd like to see in the comments below. See you next time! Bye!